straightanswerflorida.org.
Let's talk about home protection a little bit. That's another question we get a lot is, there's a lot of different kinds of things on the market out there. What should we get? And there are several things that we like that are out there on the market and several things that seem like they may be good protection tools but do have their limitation. And I'd like to start off with one of those devices. And it's a handheld stun gun. And you'll notice those are the ones that have the thing, you press the button and the spark, it starts to spark, it makes a loud noise. And that's probably the best part of that particular home defense weapon, is a very good visual deterrent a lot of times. And sometimes the people breaking into a home, if they see that kind of a weapon in someone's hand, it could be a deterrent in some cases. But I will say the more hardened criminals, stun guns are used a lot in a correctional facility. So they have a lot of awareness on what those things are and the limitations. A lot of these criminals have actually felt stun guns applied to them, so they're not overly surprised when they feel them. They understand what they feel like. So a stun gun has limitations because the bad guy may not be that afraid of the stun gun. But the biggest limitation of a handheld stun gun is that it has to actually be touching the individual. It actually has to be pressed against the clothing or the persons. If I had a loved one at home alone and all they had was a stun gun, yes, I'd rather them have a stun gun than nothing. But personally, I would rather have them have something else that was more effective. Because again, the bad guy knows that you're holding it in that hand and he can get very close to you and a lot of times just hit your arm and the stun gun's going to go flying, and they know that. So I would push for something a little better that can keep the distance. One such tool that's out in the market now is a dart firing stun gun. There's a brand name of the one that's most widely known called Taser, and it's a civilian model of Taser, the same thing a lot of law enforcement officers carry, and it actually has one charge in it, and you press the button and it shoots two darts that are attached by wires, and the darts actually connect to the individual, to their skin or to their clothing, and completes a circuit. And it continues to emit a charge, and that individual generally will go down to the ground, and after you've shot that individual with that stun gun, you can literally put that stun gun on the ground and escape. That stun gun will continue to put a charge in that individual. You can escape, get to a safe place, call us. So that's a pretty good device. A lot of them come with a red laser on them. Some even come with a flashlight where you push the button, it'll actually light up and have a red laser, and then you can actually deploy it so you can actually hit the individual. The limitations of a stun gun, with a dart firing stun gun, is that most of them have only one charge. Where you hit it, you actually have to hit the bad guy, otherwise it has not worked. Now the good part about it is you can still use it as a stun gun, as an old-fashioned stun gun where it has to be applied. But the nice thing about it is because it has the red dot on it, you can generally hit the individual. And hopefully, again, as you're holding that stun gun and the bad guy sees it, hopefully he's going to turn around and run before you have a chance to push that button. That would be the goal of it. And you're able to keep a nice safe distance between you and the bad guy. The other things that are out there have been out there for a long time. Chemical agents, we sometimes referred to as gas, sometimes referred to by brand names such as mace. We actually still believe that mace or gas or chemical agents are still very effective in a lot of situations. They have a pretty good range, 10 to 12 foot range. They're still very effective. And what we'd recommend, though, if you're gonna consider a chemical agent as your home defense weapon, that you get more than one. You get an additional one for training purposes, so that a lot of times when people in an emergency situation, that's a bad time, the wrong time to pick up your bottle of chemical agent and try to figure out how it works. You also want to know how it streams. Is it a spray or is it a stream? How far does it go? How much is in it? And you want to have some confidence with it as your tool to protect yourself. So we would recommend that you buy 5 or 6. One is a training aid for you and your family members, and the other is to put in strategic locations around your home so that you don't have just one buried at the bottom of your purse, which happens to be in the car or wherever it happens to be. You have one in the master bathroom, you have one in the master bedroom, you have one in the laundry room, you have them in a variety of locations, and you know where they are. They can also be brought with you as well, and are a good self-defense weapon too out in the public. Again, you want to make sure though you have it handy. You don't want to have it if it's at the bottom of a purse where you're looking for it in times of trouble. You want to make sure that you have it at quick disposal if you ever need it. Then we're of course left with firearms, and there's nothing more capable of defending your life and the life of your family and those you love than a firearm. However, firearms come with certain limitations as well. One of the biggest problems with firearms is that they're stored inappropriately. A lot of times when burglars break into a house, they realize a lot of homes have firearms in them, and it's one of the things they're looking for. So when a burglar breaks into the house, he generally heads right for the master bedroom. He's looking for firearms that may be between the mattress and the box spring or in the desk drawers, or he's looking for pharmaceutical medications that are in the cabinet in the master bathroom, or he's looking for jewelry, which you'll store in and around the master bedroom. That's where that burglar really wants to be. So when it comes to firearms, you really want to store it in a safe location. Now, 30 or 40 years ago, it was difficult because if you had a firearm for protection, if you stored it in a safe, by the time you got it out of the safe, it really wasn't very valuable for home protection. It would take too long to get it to protect yourself and your family. So what would happen years and years ago is that people would leave the gun accessible so they could protect their family, and all too often accidents would occur. Children would get hold of these firearms because they were too easily accessible, or they would be stolen during burglaries. But today that's not the case. Today, for less than a couple of $100s, you can have safes that you can buy that can be installed on the floor or in the wall that are either encrypted with your fingerprint or encrypted with a code, have lighted keypads, and are basically stored away from children, and even burglars can't get at them. And you're able to, in a time of emergency, get and retrieve that firearm in seconds. So that way you have access to the firearm very quickly, but no one else has access to it. And if you're going to spend $400, $500, $600 for a firearm, if you could, spend the extra $100, $200 to get a safe to make sure it is safe. It's great peace of mind, and it'll keep it out of the wrong hands and still give you the protection you need when you need it. One of the next questions we get, especially during this time of year, is sometimes children are left home alone. Now, we in law enforcement would always ask that young children never be left home alone. A lot of times, even very mature young children can make pretty serious mistakes without parental guidance. But as children get older and become teens and are able to take on that kind of a responsibility, parents sometimes feel comfortable enough to let them stay home for periods of time. And that's a decision for you to make. But with that decision comes some things that you may want to do to make sure that child does have the right answers to make sure that they're protected. Number one, if something happens that is an accident, such as a fire, and this will happen sometimes where a child will be preparing a meal and a fire occurs, and children will be very concerned about a situation like that, and they will try to put out the fire. And nothing is more important to any of us than their lives and their safety. So the first thing that they need to be able to do is to get out and call 911 and have the fire department come and put out that fire. They don't need to spend any precious time or risk themselves or their safety in trying to address that fire situation. The most important thing is their safety, and they have to understand that. And that if an accident happens like that, we definitely don't want that happening, but the only thing that's important to us is their safety and their life. And they have to understand that from you as a parent to them. The second thing is the fact that sometimes children, and we do this as parents, will tell them don't answer the door because a stranger could come to the door. But as you've heard with burglary, sometimes what will happen is the burglar who's going to the front door is trying to determine that no one's home. And that's one of the things that they're trying to do is break into an unoccupied home. We've had a lot of burglars of occupied homes tell us time and time again, I didn't realize the home was occupied. I knocked on the door and people didn't come to the door. And a lot of times that's what we train our children to do. And years ago it was probably sage advice. But today things have changed to where burglars are actually knocking on the door, oftentimes very loudly and aggressively, because they're trying to determine if someone's home. If someone's home, then they lose the desire to burglarize that home at that particular time in most instances. So the old adage of telling children not to answer the door probably needs to be changed or revised just a bit. We don't want children running to the door and opening the door to a stranger. Obviously, that's not safe either. We don't want children really being identified, and that's why we talked about obscuring the glass with some type of opaque window film. And you may even, we would even suggest that you put a door viewer in the door. And that way the child can peer out without taking a look at this individual at all. And you don't want the child even having to move a curtain or a blind to look at someone through, because as he's looking at the child's looking at the potential burglar, the burglar's looking at the child. We don't want the burglar to have any information whatsoever. But we do want the burglar to know there is someone in that home. And it is okay, and I know this sounds wrong, but I'm going to tell you that I think it is okay for a child to fib at that particular moment. It is okay for a child to say, my dad is sleeping right now. He works the night shift. I don't really want to wake him up. Can you come back later? Or a situation like that, where the burglar now hears there's someone home in the form of a child, but there is or a teen, but there is also probably an adult sleeping in the house. So, but we do want that verbal engagement to take place so that the burglar knows there is someone in the home, preferably more than one person in the home. The second thing we want the child to do is not to fall for anything that the burglar will say. And the parent should rehearse with the child. What the burglar will say are things like, I'm sorry, I need to use your phone, my wife has been hurt, I've got to make a phone call, etc. And what the child can do at that point in time, instead of opening the door, is the child can say, I am going to call the police for you right now. And that child should call the police in that situation, or in any situation where the child is suspicious about someone at the front door. And they can call 911 right then and there and say, there is a suspicious person at my front door. He's asking for help, that someone has been injured, but I am home alone and I've been told not to open the door. And the dispatcher, the emergency dispatcher, will tell the child they did a good job, and they will send a deputy or a police officer to that location to check on that individual. Most likely, if it's someone who's not there for good reasons, they will tell the child, no, you don't have to call. It's okay, I have a phone, I'll take care of it, and they'll leave quickly. But in any case, the child should make that call. But that is something that we should do, is to make sure that the child never opens the door, but that the bad guy on the other side of the door does know people are home. Because the problem is that if he does what we told him to do 30 years ago and doesn't address the door, if it is a burglary attempt, the next thing we'll hear is glass breaking or a door being kicked in, and that is the worst situation of all, is for a burglar to break into a home and encounter a child inside of a home. We have no clue about what's going to happen at that stage, and none of us want to be in that situation. So that's why we believe engaging the individual behind the locked, closed door is good. Now, one of the things that we used to see a lot of are these chain locks on doors, where we would open the door and it would only open 3 or 4 inches because a chain or a bar would stop it from opening all the way. We don't like those for 2 reasons. One is they're very weak, and a bad guy can easily take a little bit of force and pop that chain right open. So it's not a good security tool. It just gives a false sense of security to the individual on the other side of the door. It's not good. And 2, we don't want that child being identified. That child may be 14, maybe 15 as a teen. We don't want the bad guy to know what that person looks like. We don't want them to gauge how old they are. We don't want the bad guy to have any information at all about the homeowner or the person that's inside the home. Again, that gives him an advantage and gives us a disadvantage. So keep that door locked, bolted shut, communicate through the door, and then make that phone call. And I think parents have to instill in children that we are here to help. Law enforcement is here to help. And a lot of times, kids are very nervous about making a 911 call. And they shouldn't be. If they're ever suspicious when they're home alone, that is what we're here for, is they make the call. It's better to be safe than sorry. And we'll show up and we'll check out the situation and see. And hopefully it proves to be nothing, but in a case where if it was really a suspicious person meaning to do harm, hopefully we'll get that person and we'll be able to match him up to another burglary, or at least be able to stop him from being interested in that particular house.